Welcome to this next episode of the Maza's Musings podcast. We have Greg Cameron returning from his world travels to talk some Red Sox, Patriots, Bruins, and Celtics, and even a little bit of the Olympics. It's been a little while since we've really talked some sports on this show, outside of Eileen and I doing a little bit of banter in one of the most recent episodes. So it's really exciting to get back to one of the core things that I really wanted to do with this podcast from the start. If you're a Boston sports fan, you're going to love this episode. If you're not, well, you can just enjoy the fact that two guys are doing one of the things that they love to do. Before we get into it, as always, I want to thank everybody who has been listening and ask you to help us grow our audience. You can give us a like on Facebook. That's at the Maza's Musings podcast. There's also the Instagram account, which is Maza's Musings Pod. You can go straight to our website, which is mazasmusings.wordpress.com, and you can share that address, and people can find past episodes, more information about the podcast. There's also contact info there. You can also reach out to me directly at mazasmusings@gmail.com. And of course, one of the best ways to help people find us is to give us a good rating or a review on whatever you're using to find your podcasts. That helps us in the algorithms and all the other things that determine what bumps things up in people's lists of suggested items and makes it easier for people to find us. So if you've really been enjoying the content here, please let people know and share it and give us a review or even word of mouth. Tell people, hey, Chris has this great podcast going on, or hey, this guy you don't know, he does a pretty good podcast. Either way, it's helping us reach more people with the fun that we try to have on this podcast, and the more people having fun, just the better place this world is, and we just want to have a little part in that. And of course, one of the really fun things that we enjoy talking about on this is Disney. So we will again have the Maza's Mickey Minute as part of this episode. This one will be a much shorter minute. And that is partially because Greg and I had a lot to say about Boston sports. And we tie in a little bit of international stuff too at the end. So why don't we get right to it? And here we go.
It's showtime! Don't forget the orchestra!
Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Mom says there's even more magical stuff now.
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the doors.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness. And here we go!
Well, for today's Maza's Mickey Minute, we're going to talk about the announcement that was recently made about D23's Ultimate Disney Fan Event, which is taking place in Anaheim on August 9th through 11th. This is one of the big events for Disney, and a lot of great news comes out about different things that are going to be happening entertainment-wise in the parks and all manner of things Disney. We actually have a friend, Dan, who is going to be in attendance, and Dan has agreed to come on to talk with us about what he sees and his impressions from being there. So we're excited for that report afterwards, because especially if you've listened to prior episodes, Emily from We Do Travel Right told us that they were told that there was going to be some, quote, hot tea, end quote, coming out of D23 this year. So this year there are going to be more than 200 experiences, 230 panels and presentations, floor show offerings, talent central interactions, all kinds of different things. I'm just going to go through a few of these just to give you a taste of what people are going to experience when you're there. In terms of stage programming, there's going to be a 30 years of Toy Story. First of all, Imagine Toy Story is 30 years old. I just feel ancient when I hear that. There's going to be a behind the design of Inside Out 2. And they're also going to give a little sneak peek on a quote unquote dreamy sneak peek of an upcoming Pixar series. There's going to be celebrating 50 years of Wolverine. There's also going to be a Disney Princess concert. There's the Muppets 70, a glamorous Miss Piggy retrospective in terms of show floor experiences. There's going to be the Walt Disney Archives Presents, a great big beautiful car show. The Pixar Animation Studios and Walt Disney Animation Studios are going to have a pavilion. There's going to be a Magic of Disney on Broadway because Disney on Broadway is celebrating 30 years. Lucasfilm is going to be showing some of the technology used to bring things like The Mandalorian and Ahsoka to life. Marvel Studios is going to have a walkthrough experience. As far as Talent Central goes, they say that there are going to be all kinds of Disney legends, Disney artists and authors, voice talent, and stars from different Disney movies, series, and shows. There's just a lot that is going to be happening here, and that's in addition to the news that's going to come out of here. Now, this is a sold-out event, so if you have tickets, congratulations, because it sounds like it's going to be awesome. If you don't have tickets, well, I'd suggest listening to this podcast so that you can get a feel for the experience when Dan comes on with us. We're excited to have Dan, and we'll have to set that up because at the same time that he's in Anaheim, Eileen and I are going to be on our adults-only trip at Walt Disney World, so we will likely have a trip report after that as well. So we'll have to figure out how all this is going to work. But either way, it's going to be exciting, so I encourage you to listen. That will probably be sometime mid-August that we hear from Dan, and you'll also hear from us about our trip, which hopefully will include a ride on Tiana's Bayou Adventure and our impressions of the Halloween party, which we've never done. Anyway, trying to keep this short, so that is this week's Maza's Mickey Minute. And you know what else only takes a minute? And that's getting your free quote from We Do Travel Right. We Do Travel Right is that concierge level service that includes the We Do Travel Right dining team. They take care of all of the stuff that you need for your vacation so you can focus on just having fun. If you're not going to Disney and you're looking at Universal Studios or a cruise or an all-inclusive, they have people who can help you with that too. The best part is all of their services are free because the companies like Disney build the prices of an agent into their prices. So you're paying for it whether you use it or not. So you can get your free quote with no obligation at wedotravelright.com/Maza. That's wedotravelright.com/MAZA. And you can get your magical trip started today. Oh, and by the way, if you've booked a trip recently, say within the last 30 days, you can transfer that to We Do Travel Right, and they'll take over from there. So once again, if you're interested in a trip, if you've booked a trip, check out We Do Travel Right. wedotravelright.com/Maza.
Well, I can't do any more damage around this popsicle stand.
So long, partner.
See you real soon.
Alrighty, I am here with Greg Cameron. Greg, it has been a minute, as the young
It
kids
has
say.
indeed been a minute. Yes, it has.
Well, yeah, the last time that we talked some sports was actually before the NFL draft. We did our draft preview and we talked about some Tim Wakefield and a couple of other things, but that's the last time that we've that we've talked. And I guess on top of everything else, you've been jet setting across the world. So first off, how was your trip, my friend?
My trip was very, very good. We went to Italy and Ireland for my honeymoon. My wife and I got married in September. Maza was there. He was a witness. He bore witness to this wedding. So we were in Italy and Ireland over the course of about 18 days. So we were in. I can do the very TLDR, too long, don't read. We were in Milan, Lake Garda, Verona for a couple of hours, then Venice for 3 days. Which, if you've never been to Venice, Italy, you should, because going to Venice, Italy it's exactly what you think it looks like and what you think it should look like. But like the coolest thing about Venice is you get off of the train and like the big glass doors are open at the end of the exit and entrance of the train station, and it's there's Venice. There it is. If you've ever wondered what it looks, there it is. It's right there. And I wanted to see it before the planet kind of tells me, oh no, you cannot see this. This is just not available to you because water is crazy. And then after Venice, we went to Florence. And then from Florence, after 3 days, we went to Rome. And then on our way back from Italy, we stopped in Dublin, Ireland for 2 days. And cannot recommend going to Dublin, Ireland in the middle of the summer enough, especially if you've been in the sweltering kind of Mediterranean heat across all of Italy like we were. It was a welcome change from 90-degree heat and humidity to 65, 70-degree, kind of cold. Should have brought a sweatshirt. Thank goodness for the Guinness Storehouse having merch kind of weather, which was pretty great. And then we flew back home from Dublin to Boston on Friday. But I will say one more kind of feather in the cap for Dublin is the Dublin airport has pre-clearance for customs, so you do not have to go through customs on the way back after you've visited Dublin. So we did the customs on the way, kind of on the start of the way back, it was 5 minutes. It was easy breezy, beautiful, and then we hopped on our plane and came home.
Excellent. So did you have a favorite spot?
Yes, I loved the little town we went to in Lake Garda. There's a town called Sirmione, and it was what's really cool about Lake Garda is it's the largest of the lakes in Italy. It's not Lake Como. Don't let George Clooney tell you that that's the better lake. It's Lake Garda. And but what I loved about this lake is that it's like a clear water lake that has this peninsula kind of going through like the base of it, and this town Sirmione is that peninsula, and this lake kind of sits at the feet of the Dolomites of the Dolomite Mountains in Italy. So there are these huge tall mountains that kind of were bordering this big, beautiful, gorgeous, clear blue lake.
Wow.
And it was awesome. My wife and I didn't hear any American English for about 2 or 3 days, which was great. It was like our second to last day there, and I was like, huh, that sounds like a guy from like the Midwest. I haven't heard an American accent in days. But it was really great and really fun to kind of be traveling in Europe while the European football championships were happening. Sorry, soccer championships for Americans. We were in Italy while Italy was still playing in the tournament before they were unceremoniously bounced by the Swiss one of the Saturdays that we were there. But it was just really fun to sort of be in a town like that. We watched one of the games during the Euros that Italy played in Sirmione, and it was just a whole lot of fun. A great, cool little town. There was an open water swim race that was happening while we were there. There was we went to a really cool kind of I think it's a UNESCO heritage site in Sirmione, that it's this former like mansion villa that the poet Catullus lived in, and you can kind of walk through the ruins of it, and then you get down to the end of the ruins, and there's Jamaica Beach is right there, which is sort of the big beach in Sirmione.
Cool.
And and for my money, I really loved. It's not really like beachy, but it's like kind of Maine-ish, like rocky beach. But what I loved is I could kind of sit on like a little bar that was kind of up above like the beach, and you can kind of people watch and have the greatest German beer, Tuborg, which was a personal favorite of my brother's when he studied in Italy too. So just a nice kind of way to kind of spend a little bit of an afternoon in a small, kind of tucked away coastal town. It was great.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to have you back. I'm glad that we're able to get together and talk some sports. It's been too long.
Yes.
And we'll start with the team that is gracing the can of your beverage of choice this evening, which is, of course, the Boston Celtics. Some nice product placement there for Jack Savvy. We are getting no benefits of that other than drinking some lovely beverages.
It's a great little beer, by the way. If you haven't had the Banner City Light Lager, it is for my money one of the better lawnmower beers that you can get around here in New England, and you're getting it from a good local brewery too.
Excellent. Well, so as you know, and some of the people listening may know, I'm not much of a pro basketball aficionado, so I'm going to kind of what I'm relaying is basically what fans like you who I interact with have kind of related to me.
Sure.
And I guess, obviously, first off, how gratifying, especially as close as they've come over the past few years, and the disappointment, how gratifying was Banner 18?
Banner 18 was awesome. When they won their 17th championship, I was in college. I was working at Channel 40 in Springfield, which was showing all of the games. So I was doing all of the stuff for which would probably be the midnight newscast, and we had watched it in the studio of the old setup of Channel 40. And this team reminds me a lot of that team. That they were just a really tight-knit, cohesive group that had, not necessarily a whole lot of star power quite like that 08 team. But what I loved about this team was everybody who played on that team had a role to play and did it. We talked the last time that we were here, we had talked about Drew Holiday had signed his extension.
Yeah.
His 4-year extension. And what I think was really great for sort of casuals to really check out the Celtics during the NBA Finals was to just see what kind of an impact that guy can have on a game. He's not one of the flashiest guys in basketball. He's even talking to the media, he's a pretty quiet guy. But what I love about how Drew Holiday plays the game of basketball, he plays it so hard and so kind of smartly and consistently, and just he plays the game the right way to a point that even the band Tenacious D took note of his basketball prowess with they made a fictitious award of the Tenacious D Award, and he actually went to Jack Black's house to accept it. I just love that about a guy like Drew Holiday, who at first thinks this isn't real and goes, sure, let's just do this. This is a fun, weird thing. To probably my favorite guy in the Celtics team is Derek White. I love Derek White. Derek White is the exact right vibes guy for a team. You need a guy who didn't have everything kind of handed to him. Derek White certainly did. He almost went to play basketball at Johnson in Wales at one point. Played his basketball at Colorado. Started at a D2 school and then transferred to Colorado to CU Boulder. And then now he's on the Olympic team after the performance that he had in the NBA playoffs. So I can always appreciate a guy who hits the floor so hard, one of his teeth gets dislodged, and then just takes about 2 seconds to get it checked out by the trainer and goes right back out. He'd be a perfect third line Bruin. I just love that guy. And I think what can you say about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown that haven't already been said? That I think the two of them for years, the media here in Boston had been trying to split them apart and trying to convince people that they just weren't, that they can't play together. They don't have all of these different things that just make them incompatible to win a championship. Well, I think now we've seen that they can play pretty darn well together. And I think one of the narratives during the NBA Finals that certainly I found a little bothersome was Jaylen Brown had been playing so well that people kept trying to be like, well, Tatum's jealous, when the two of them don't have to be best friends. But I think being on the same team, you're rooting for your colleagues, you're rooting for your teammates, and I think the two of them are just so very different from each other personality-wise that I think people look at that as they can't really coexist. But I think if you ask the Dallas Mavericks and Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, I think they'll tell you that they can coexist perfectly fine.
Now, you mentioned Derek White. You mentioned Drew Holiday. It seems they're trying to run this back with obviously Tatum got his extension as well, or a massive deal that he got. So I wonder. There have been times where this kind of thing happens and they try to run it back and it just the same magic isn't there. So do you see? It seems though that you feel that these are pieces that all just lock in much better than some other situations where they were successful, but it took a bit of hammering into place.
I do. I think the thing is that their top six guys all do different things. There isn't necessarily one guy who does something that a couple of other guys also do. I think locking down Drew Holiday was the first part of it. Of sort of this new brand of the Celtics, where I think you had to have the lockdown point guard who was going to really set everything from the backcourt, and they didn't have that in 2022 when they played against the Golden State Warriors. Your starting point guard was Marcus Smart, and look, we love Marcus Smart here in Boston, and rightfully so. He gave his heart and soul to Boston and into this fan base, but Drew Holiday gives you something that Marcus Smart can't. And Marcus Smart would get a little trigger happy when it would come to shooting the ball. And Holiday doesn't do that. Holiday knows that he's at best the fourth option. And I think this team is built to last. You didn't have Porzingis for a few nights during the NBA Finals, but I certainly think that, Al Horford stepped up, and you had even guys like Xavier Tillman, who they traded for at the trading deadline, play really well. So I think for me, what I really like about what this team has done is I think they've built their foundation, and then through the draft, they've been able to draft pieces that at some point are going to be big pieces later on. They drafted Jordan Walsh last year, who I think is a really dynamic defender and growing into a really good offensive player when the time comes. They just drafted Baylor Shireman from college, and he's a 3-point assassin. He's a tall 3-point guy, kind of in the mold of a Doug McDermott, which is something that they didn't really have. They didn't really have a 3-point shooter off the bench to complement Sam Hauser, who they already have. So I think what's really great about what they're trying to do is they're trying to rebuild a foundation after kind of this core moves on.
So the last thing about this, and this is kind of piggybacking on what you're talking about with team building and everything, is one of the narratives that I've heard is kind of the Danny Ainge walked, so the current decision makers could run. Is that something you subscribe to, you buy, or did you know, or were they making the best of what was a little bit of a mess of second round picks, from like 17 different moves?
I think so. I think the thing is, and you saw it from the first move that Brad Stevens made when he got into the GM chair, was he traded their first round pick to get Al Horford back.
Mm-hmm.
Like people forget that pick was like a mid first round pick. They traded it to Oklahoma City to get Al Horford back, and I'm encouraged by the fact that Stevens isn't afraid to make moves. You get Derek White at the trade deadline in 22 because the pieces they initially brought in just simply weren't working. And I think what Ainge didn't want to do was Danny Ainge didn't want to really deal draft picks. I think he saw them as magic beans that, this could be something. But if you're kind of in the middle of the pack every year, what exactly kind of magical thing are you getting? I mean, every draft doesn't have a Giannis Antetokounmpo that falls to 15 to 17 and then becomes a superstar. That just doesn't happen. So I think what the Celtics have done is they figured out that they have a core, and then they're going to just sort of build things around that core with complementary guys. And maybe if somebody shakes out and turns into a core player kind of after this core kind of ages out and moves on, then great. I think they're just sort of really happy just being in the now, and I think that's how Brad Stevens is looking at it. I question. I don't necessarily know it, but I sort of question if his collegiate experience really kind of holds sway with a lot of this decision making, because I wonder if sort of having guys for 3 or 4 years sort of molds how he thinks about sort of player movement and player development. But I'm just very curious to sort of see what this team looks like kind of next year. I'm interested to see what a lot of these young guys who are going to be playing in the summer league later this summer sort of look like, and sort of how that shakes out too. But I think from here, I'm interested to sort of see how the Celtics are kind of shaking out. The ownership thing sort of weirds me out, that immediately after the championship that the Grossbeck family kind of said that they're going to sell off their shares. But I part of me really thinks that the next logical step would be that Steve Paliuca probably would run into the Celtics and sort of be that next owner. But who knows?
I just saw something interesting that he just put his house on the market.
Paliuca?
Yeah.
Interesting. I did not see that.
He's got like an $8 million house. Can't remember where. One of the towns that starts with a W.
Weston. Is it Weston?
It might be. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. But shortly before we got on this, I saw that, and so that I thought was especially odd. I don't know. Maybe he's building more, trying to build more cash on hand for a purchase or something like that. But that was something that, as an quote unquote outsider looking in, struck me as odd, especially given Wick's recent decision to put his shares up.
I will tell you, and we'll talk about another team certainly in this portfolio later on. The potential buyer that I think would scare me the most is the Fenway Sports Group.
Yeah,
is John Henry and Tom Warner. That would scare me the most. I mean, they've made no bones about it that they want an NBA franchise. I mean, they have LeBron James as part of their kind of investor group.
Well, that is my question. Would that create a conflict of interest? Would they not be able to do that because he's involved?
That I don't know. What I do know is they have certainly been trying to buy an NBA franchise, and I think I had heard, I don't know sort of the validity of it, but I had heard, for instance, that they were trying to buy the Bruins from the Jacobs. And the Jacobs are never going to sell. Why would they? Why? Before they bought the Pittsburgh Penguins. So they're definitely thinking about expanding that portfolio, and I think they at least want to attempt to expand that portfolio here. But part of me also thinks that they wouldn't necessarily be interested because they wouldn't own the arena.
Right.
You know, the Jacobs own the Garden.
Real estate business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They really are. They are. I don't know. I question, you know, if Larry Ellison gets involved. I think that would be. I mean, he's the fifth richest man in the world, something like that. Part of me hopes it's definitely somebody who has ties to the area. I don't really quite know how it's going to go. You know, I'm hoping that maybe it's Paliuka in a group, but you know, Paliuka has an interesting sports portfolio too. He owns Atalanta, which is an Italian soccer team in Serie A in Italy, and I believe they just won Serie A, and which is the top flight of Italian soccer. So I'm just sort of wondering, you know, what interest he maybe would have in buying the Celtics, but who knows? It's going to be very interesting. Supposedly, it's going to be a quick bidding process, and I think Wick would still be involved as the team governor until 2028. So he'd still be around and still making decisions, but I don't know.
Well, we'll have to see how that all plays out. So moving on, I have a question for you, and this was a question that I didn't think that I would be asking at this point. We are sitting here on July 10th, and I'm asking the question: are the Boston Red Sox actually good?
Yes. Yes, they are. It took them a while to figure out who they are. It took a buttload of injuries to sort of get them to that point. But I sort of really love the identity of this team right now. I think they've become sort of this go-go, steal bases, play good defense, play a game predicated on speed that I don't think I've ever seen a Red Sox team play this way.
It's the anti-nerd baseball, like, you know, you're
a little.
Honestly, you know, so much of what I see is it's all about, you know, that the baseball nerds, and I apologize to anybody who subscribes to this with, you know, but basically so much of it is they hate moving runners over. They hate basically anything that doesn't have to do with trying to launch the ball as far as you possibly can, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I honestly wonder what the steroid era would have looked like if they had like this kind of data on launch angles and things like that. I mean, just imagine, you know, Mark McGuire and Barry Bonds, you know, with that kind of data. And so I don't dismiss the data. I think that, you know, there's validity to it. It's interesting that the Red Sox are being a team that we have not seen a Red Sox team really be, to your point earlier.
A speedy team. I don't remember a speedy Red Sox team with this kind of speed in my lifetime. No. Maybe those teams in the mid-'90s when you had guys like Jeff Fry and John Valentin and Nomar who could run, but they were helmed by Jimmy Williams, who didn't really give a crap about stealing bases and any of that. So, but like, I think what I love about this team, and Alex Cora had said it after beating the Yankees on Sunday, was that, you know, they changed their narrative. They figured out what kind of team they could be compared to trying to play a style of baseball that just doesn't fit who they are. You know, it took a while for, you know, middle infielder du jour to really sort of figure out who these guys are, and they figured out a great rotation for these guys. I think having a reliable bench guy like Rob Refsnyder is a big deal. He's a lot like he's the Red Sox Derek White. He doesn't necessarily need to play all the time, doesn't need to really, be a star guy, but when you need him to be reliable, he's more often than not reliable.
So I think that this, when we're talking about the speed, I think that I have to come clean on something, and that is that I couldn't have been more wrong about Jarren Duran. I thought that guy was so far in his own head that he was never going to find his way out, and he's proven me wrong. He's all-star caliber this year, so I have to take a lap on that one, because I saw him in Worcester last year, dropping balls in the outfield and just looking like a mess. And he's responded to the adversity. I know it sounds cliche to say, but that guy was a mess.
He was, and I think the thing that's so great about that is I don't know that he overcomes all of that without having a manager who is as receptive as Alex Cora is. There was, I'm sure you saw the quote, or at least saw the anecdote of it, that Alex Cora had said to him, "Hey, I'm going to sit you down. I'm going to give you a day off." And this was earlier this year. Yeah. And he had said to him, he's like, "No, I'm playing 162. F that." And then walked out of his office, and Cora was like, "Okay, he's going to play." And I think for a guy like that, especially with sort of his mental health history, I think him being able to play every day and then being able to play at this kind of a level is great for him. I don't know that I've seen a guy turn things around quite like Jarren Duran. And it wasn't necessarily anything crazy huge. It was like slight tweaks to his batting stance and his slight tweaks to his swing and taking better care of the ball, playing defense. And I think it's a lot of that, and I think it's having positive reinforcement from a manager who believes in it. I remember during this whole offseason thinking, well, shouldn't the Red Sox just trade Jarren Duran for pitching? Maybe they should have, but they've got an all-star left fielder now who can do everything, who can hit homers, who can steal bases, who can hit triples. He's on pace for 24 triples. He has 10 at the All-Star break. 10. I can't remember a Red Sox player that had that many triples in a season. He has it. It's July 10th. Yeah. I'm so happy for that guy.
And really we've seen, I think that one of the real, I don't want to sell anybody short. We've seen some of the young guys really, in a lot of ways, the future is now. You look at what Rafael has been doing, the last 31 days, heading into the next game, he's batting over 300. His OPS is over 800. He's got 36 hits over those 31 days, and 12 of them are extra base hits. So, you're seeing guys really kind of develop and figure it out. And not necessarily a young guy, but Connor Wong is looking like he's the crown jewel of the Mookie Betts trade at this point. the guy's an all-star snub.
I was just about to say to you, I was going to ask you if you thought that Connor Wong should have been one of the all-star catchers, and I think catcher is a hard position, and to get any kind of offense out of a catcher in this day and age who isn't Salvador Perez or Adley Rutschman, he's having a great year. He's having one of those years. There was one of those years where it probably was 2021, where that Christian Vasquez had, where it just kind of came out of nowhere and then sort of set him into being a consistent player. And I just hope that Connor Wong can be consistent. I'm just glad that they're getting something out of that trade that's a positive. Verdugo.
Look, I have thoughts on that, and if Connor Wong is what you're getting out of that trade, then you lost that trade. But
Oh yeah. I
but
mean that's sort of like me talking myself into Marco Sturm out of the Joe Thornton trade. And trust me, I loved Marco Sturm. I loved that guy. I look at that trade the same way, that, the guy that you were expecting to be kind of the centerpiece of that deal isn't necessarily the guy who's the centerpiece of that deal.
yeah,
I think that comp is a good one, in that I don't think anybody thought Connor Wong was going to be really anything special, just like I don't think Bruins fans were really thinking that Marco Sturm was going to be anything special. I think they thought that the real get in that deal was Brad Stewart.
mm-hmm.
Sturm was just sort of a throw-in. And it's, I think you can look at both deals and say that maybe they should have held out for better compensation. But for me, I think just seeing Connor Wong sort of grow into a really good, serviceable major leaguer is a great thing. Especially catchers are late bloomers. Catchers are a lot like NHL goalies. They're late bloomers. You don't necessarily know what you have until you have it. And I think
NFL tight ends, same way.
Yeah, exactly. There are certain nuances to positions like that take a long time to really present themselves, and I think it's just nice to see Connor Wong contributing and playing at near all-star levels.
Now, with all this said, it also frustrates me a little bit, because I think of how good this team could be if they had invested a little more in another good veteran or two.
They need a grown up.
The thing that I've said is I don't have any problem with developing prospects, developing a farm system, and
Agreed.
And having grassroots players. I also don't have a problem with buying a championship.
Same.
If you're the Boston Red Sox, you're one of the few teams that has the luxury of doing a little bit of both. There's been this weird binary look at it. It's like they're either, Dave Dombrowski, and they're selling everything off to get, these, known Major League Baseball commodities, or it's like, okay, well, we're selling everything off to get draft picks and prospects. And ownership for a while seemed to be flip-flopping between one to the other. They went from one extreme to another. And to a certain degree, I feel like they finally, stopped flip-flopping, and they went from Chaim Bloom, who was big about developing the farm system and everything like that, which needed work, to another guy who has that similar mindset. And it's one of those things that I'm kind of like, you can do both. And so I'm a little worried as we're getting to this. Well, we'll get into the deadline in a second, but
which we should.
I feel like you said, an adult in the room or something like that, or you got a bunch of middle schoolers running around. If there's if the high schooler comes in, and everybody just kind of goes, whoa, even that kind of thing, helps if you're actually thinking that if you had the belief in these guys. I feel like one or two of those things could have put them in a much better position to not just be, hey, this could be a wild card team.
I think so. Here's what's interesting. I think there are a couple things there. And I agree with a lot of the points that you made. I think first, they had signed Lucas Giolito, thinking that Giolito was going to be that adult on the pitching staff. Prior to this year, to the elbow injury he got in spring training, he was a 200 inning guy every year. Excuse me, was a guy who consistently went out there and posted and shoved every year. He had a down year last year, went through a fairly messy divorce, and played on 3 different teams last year, which is why the Red Sox were able to get him at the discount that they got. I think what the front office thought was he was going to be the guy. He was going to be the stabilizing figure, like James Paxton was the year before. I think Giolito getting hurt was such a blow to the initial part of this Red Sox team that I don't know that they even thought that was even possible. So I wonder how much better this team would be if Giolito's going out there every 5 days. Now, I think the other part of why I think this is interesting is the entire season, cameras from Netflix have been filming this entire Red Sox season for a documentary series that's going to air after the season. So I think now that this team is pretty good and they have these cameras on them all the time, I think it's a pretty good bet that they're going to be buyers at the deadline, and they're going to find that grown-up. They're going to find that person who's going to be, the adult in the room that they currently don't have.
So that's an interesting. I didn't realize that about the Netflix documentary. So that changes my mind maybe a little bit. But I guess the things that I see this team needing, and some of it was confirmed by some statements that
Craig Breslow?
Yes, excuse me. Thank you. I drew a blank there.
It's all good.
Some statements that Breslow had made. I think that I still think they need to solidify the middle infield.
Yeah.
I think they need another starter.
Yep.
And I think they need, and this was one of the ones that Breslow talked about, is they need a right-handed bat.
Mm-hmm. And you hope you can get that middle infielder to be the right-handed bat.
Yeah, well, that would be the best of both worlds.
Right.
The issue I see now is, and granted, this is a cursory look that I took at guys who are in contract years who are on teams that may be sellers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not loving this list, especially when it comes to, middle infield is pretty bare in that regard. There's the guy Rosario from Tampa Bay, the shortstop, and I don't know if he's a righty or a lefty. But in terms of middle infield, you know, there may be some guys who could shore things up defensively, but you're getting nothing offensively out of them. Like the guy from the Angels, whose name is escaping me at the moment.
Luis Rengifo.
No, that's not the one I was thinking of. But
I think Rengifo is a guy actually the Red Sox probably take a run at. Is it maybe Brendan Drury?
Yes, I think that was the one. And he's more of a, all over the infield utility guy.
He is.
But he also can't hit his way out of a paper bag.
Certainly this year.
But especially when we start looking at the starters who are, Washington's going to be sellers, but are you really excited about Patrick Corbin? That guy hasn't been good since, he signed that deal with Washington.
Yeah.
If the Mets decide to be sellers, I don't know what they're going to decide at this point, but they've got a couple of guys like Severino, who
I like. I like Severino. I think he's...
I like him, but I don't know if the Mets are going to be buyers or sellers. They're right on that cusp, especially with the extra wild card. That throws a lot of these things out of whack.
I'll tell you a name who I think would be very interesting. And I don't know that they would do it, but I think just thinking about it would be interesting to me. Is who has 1 year left on his deal, but I think he's vested his option already for the following year, is Nathan Eovaldi for the Texas Rangers. Would that not be an adult in the room?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good one. I had briefly looked at him, but I was, I wasn't. That was one of those ones that I wasn't sure that they would pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, and I mean, if the Mets are still sort of hanging around, Sean Manaea is a guy I've always liked. When the year the Red Sox took Trey Ball, that's right. The reason you don't know that name is because that's a prospect who flamed out horribly. They took him the year. They took him the year after the Bobby Valentine experience. Manaea was also in that first round of the draft, and he was a guy I had always liked. I think it's very interesting because there are so many of these teams that are kind of still in it.
Yeah.
Like
there are a lot of teams that are right around like that 45 win mark right now, and it's it's really gumming things up. The conversations that I feel like it's getting more to the point that the Red Sox will make some kind of move to add.
I think they will too.
But like the conversation we're probably, if we were doing this a week or two ago, is where a lot of teams are now, where it's just like, well, and I don't know the league well enough at this point to know exactly which direction each team is going. There are some 45 win teams that are have been stuck at 45 wins for a while, and there are others that have made the kind of climb that that Boston has. I mean, you're looking at, and I mean, in terms of right-handed bats, unless you're really looking, I don't think they're looking to give up a king's ransom for anything.
Oh no!
I mean,
oh no, they're not.
And the thing is, what I'm looking at are DHs. I mean, you're looking at so these are
Justin Turner.
These are the two. These are that was one of them. That was one of the names that I had. I had Justin Turner. He was he's not. He's not performing, the way that he did with the Red Sox last year, but he on top of everything else, he mashed the ball at Fenway last year. I mean, so that was one that, but he's essentially a DH.
And not to mention, he's a really good dude. Like that's that's a big feather in his cap. It is.
Yeah. The other one now, I know he's injured right now. And he'd likely be a DH wherever he was playing, is Yoan Moncada.
Interesting. That is an interesting idea because then you'd get your top prospect from 7 years ago. I think you're not wrong thinking about the Chicago White Sox, though, as a potential trade partner for the Red Sox. But I'll let you continue on Moncada because I have other thoughts with the.
No, I mean it's just like that is the kind of thing. He's injured, he, which has been kind of his MO. But what I've heard is that when he comes back, it's going to be primarily as a DH, and the one thing that I wonder is. The Red Sox need a right-handed bat, but are they looking for a full-time DH?
You have that though in Masataka Yoshida.
Well, that's
because you can't play him in the field. Yeah,
right. Yeah, so that's this is one of those things. It's like, do you end up with where you're ending up trying to shoehorn someone into something just to say you did something, because that then you end up playing somebody at first base who's never played first base before, as an example from our past.
Hey now, Kyle from Waltham did nothing wrong.
He did not. I thought he was done dirty.
He was done very dirty. But it's very interesting. So I'm looking at Spotrac's list of free agents as we're sort of going through this, and I'm sort of scrolling, and like the middle infield crop, there isn't much. Like it's
Yeah.
Brendan Drury, it's Tim Anderson who just flamed out of Miami,
Yeah.
and it's. I think the pitching market's very interesting. Like I think you could figure you.
It seems like it's a lot of just like, I don't know. It's nobody who really moves the needle for me. I guess it's like if you're adding one of these guys, it's for that veteran presence. I don't see any of these guys as anything that's going to maybe perform any better than what they currently have on the roster.
I agree with that. I think, I think somebody like Evaldi is that type. Do you say Kikuchi would be another one of those guys?
Yeah.
I think Toronto is absolutely selling.
Frankie Montas from the Pirates. Now there's a mutual option there, so I don't know, how that,
You mean from Cincinnati?
Is he in Cincinnati now?
He's in Cincinnati.
Okay.
He didn't get traded to Cincinnati. He's been playing for them.
He's been there. Okay.
Yeah. And he's interesting. Like I think he's an interesting arm. I think he certainly didn't quite make it in New York in any way that the Yankees kind of thought.
Right.
I sort of wonder about a guy like a Jordan Montgomery in Arizona.
Yeah.
He signed so late.
Name.
He signed so late, and that team fired Scott Boras as his agent after that, and has that weird 1-year deal. I wonder if now would be the time,
Yeah, that was one of those things that it was, you're watching that and you're thinking, what is he doing? Like,
yeah.
I think they thought there were more dance partners out there, and then he found himself alone on the floor, and
and just took a deal.
Yeah,
and just took a deal.
He's just like, well, I got to eat somewhere.
yeah, exactly. And it's so very interesting, sort of how that went. Like it didn't make sense. And that actually might be a 2-year deal. Which, and I don't think the Red Sox would be players for like a Blake Snell. Like that just doesn't make sense.
No, yeah, that
Scherzer's too old, but man, would I love Scherzer here though. That would be, again, another adult in the room.
Yep.
But we'll see.
Right.
As we were talking a little bit about the Chicago White Sox, I think there are 2 pitchers that the White Sox have that I think the Red Sox would be interested in Garrett Crochet and Eric Fetty. They had interest in Eric Fetty over the offseason as he was coming back from pitching in Korea, I think. Kind of coming back to the States, but he seems like the exact kind of guy, like sort of a 2 or a 3 kind of starting pitcher who's been around a while. I think he's in his 30s. He's pitching really well. He's kind of transformed himself into a crafty starting pitcher, and I could see that being a direction that they go in. I don't think they're going to do much, but I think if they do something sort of small and kind of punchy, they'll be perfectly fine.
Well, moving on from one team that might make a modest move to a team that made kind of a surprising splash. The Bruins. I mean, one of them wasn't a surprise. So moving on from Linus Ullmark was going to happen.
Agreed.
But then, walking away from the start of the offseason with a top six center and possibly a top 4 D-man. I mean, that was not something that I had on my bingo card.
I agree with that. I think they had been hot for Elias Lindholm for at least 2 years. When Calgary traded him to Vancouver, I think they were a potential landing spot a year ago. And there were rumors of a big trade to get Jake Gensel somewhere. during the trade deadline, and the Bruins were rumored, or it was Vancouver was trying to get Jake Gensel from Pittsburgh when he ultimately landed in Carolina. That there was going to be a big 3-team deal where the Bruins end up with Elias Lindholm. It all sounded like crazy math that doesn't make sense for especially me who failed Algebra 2 as a junior in high school. But I think Lindholm had always been their guy from the start. I think the fact that Nikita Zadorov was on the market was a bonus.
Yeah.
And he's exactly the kind of defenseman that fans in this town love. He's big. He's kind of mean, at least on the ice. I could see him being Charlie McAvoy's running mate, and then you have a shutdown pair as your second pair with Hampus Lindholm and Brendan Carlo. And then you could play Andrew Peak and who's the other defenseman? Would it be Peak and like Wotherspoon, or Peak and Lohrei and Mason Lohrei, and that's a pretty good defensive core.
Yeah, I mean, Lohrei really, had his coming out party during the Stanley Cup playoffs this past year. I thought he was one of the best players on the ice for them on Sunday nights.
I do too. I think they, for kind of two really big moves, they did some good stuff. It's going to be interesting, sort of what the PTO market looks like at the beginning of training camp, to sort of see which veterans are still out there. I think they need a winger, and I think there are two candidates in Providence to be that winger. And I think it's Fabian Lysel, and the other is Georgi Merkelov, who they took out of Ohio State. I think if one of those two guys can really emerge as a winger to be kind of on one of the top two lines, then I think the Bruins are really in business. But I think I'm a little surprised they didn't try and get some speed and a speedy winger as part of free agency, especially letting a guy like DeBrusk go, who I'm happy for. I'm happy he got his money. I'm happy he got the stability in a contract that he'd been looking for, that I don't think Don Sweeney ever really wanted to give him. But they need another winger in their top six, and I just don't know quite who it is yet.
Yeah, that was going to be the next thing is, they made a couple of big moves, and I'm not sure. I'm trying not to overreact, because the way that the team looks right now is not, the way the team is going to look later, at the beginning of the season. But it's one of those things where I was just like, yeah, this is good. But looking at the projected lines and the depth, it's just like, is this enough? Or, some of what we're dealing with right now is because of the swings and misses, in terms of draft and, and development. So, I'm encouraged by what I've seen, but I wonder, if it's enough.
Yeah, I think, it's really interesting. Like, as sort of that free agency has sort of happened, you go out and you see what Nashville did, getting Stamkos, Marchessault, former Springfield Falcon Jonathan Marchessault, by the way.
That's right. He was Jonathan Audi Marchessault back then.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. He was Jonathan Audi Marchessault. That's right. With the and then being able to get a guy like Brady Shea, who is very comparable to Zadorov, I think. It's just very interesting sort of how things are going as part of kind of this league. I'm looking at SpotTrack's list of NHL free agents, and what's out there isn't necessarily, really exciting. I mean, Jakub Vrana isn't necessarily a winger I'd think about, even though he did play all year in Springfield for the Thunderbirds. Tyler Johnson's a little long in the tooth, but he's a center. It's, when your options are guys like Mike Hoffman, who have been around a long time, I don't know. Are you willing to give some money to Max Pacioretty, who's 35, and it has an injury history that, I don't know, probably scares us both 2 times over? It's very weird, and I think it's just very, very weird. Like like Lucas Raymond, like there are all these, like all the wingers that are really left are guys who are restricted free agents who you can offer sheet. I just don't know.
All right. And one thing that is moving on to what's maybe the most uncertain of topics among the 4 major teams. The most uncertain thing is probably whether or not there's actually going to be a soccer stadium in Everett. But that's a whole other topic that involves politics and things that, I'm not
well above our
interested
pay
in
grade, bud.
But it's the Patriots, and obviously most of the question marks that surround the Patriots surround the quarterback position and that rebuild. You okay over there?
Yeah, fine. Yep, totally fine. Don't worry about me. I did the rouse the yeast thing with the Allagash, and I'm wearing half of it. So it's, let me just.
But so I guess I want to just talk a little bit about where we see, because we haven't talked really. We've talked amongst ourselves, but we haven't talked on the podcast about where this team is in terms of its roster at this point, leading into training camp, which is coming up in a couple of weeks.
It's very interesting. I feel good about the Patriots' defense. I feel good about it. I don't know that I feel great. I don't know that I'm quite excited about all of the Matthew Judon contract negotiation talk. And I don't necessarily think that even if you traded him, you'd be able to get decent compensation for a guy who's coming off of a pretty big injury. But for me, I think the defense is pretty well set. Who knows what this offense is going to look like? It's very interesting because I don't know if you can want. I just don't quite know what this offense is going to look like, and I think for so many years, the identity of the New England Patriots has sort of just been, as we go, so goes our offense. And I think bringing in somebody who thinks so completely differently to the Weiss McDaniels tree of offensive coordinators, I think that's a good thing for the Patriots personally. But it's going to take a while.
Well,
it's going to take a while.
I think that and I think that it's creating some consternation because we've spent so long, since Charlie Weiss, really, we've known that there are going to be wrinkles depending on who's actually, the coordinator or calling the plays, etc. But we always had a basic understanding of what the offense was going to be. And
it was going to be an Earhart-Perkins offense.
Exactly, yeah. And, it looked a little different based on whatever the personnel was or what the preferences of whoever the offensive coordinator was. But there were the core concepts that you knew what they were. You knew what it was going to look like when before they tried it out on the field. Offensively, obviously, we don't know what the scheme's going to look like, but there are a couple of concerns that I have.
I agree.
The first one is the same concern that we've had, and it's the offensive line. I don't think that they have to be great. I don't think they have to be world beaters. I think that they have to be solid and
average.
I don't know if they have an average unit. I mean, they've been playing around with different combinations. I mean, they've been kicking Onwenu back inside, and everybody assumed that he was going to be the right tackle. So
he got paid as such.
What I've seen in he got
kind
paid
of
kind of in the middle of those. You know, he got paid very well for a guard and okay for a tackle.
Yeah.
You know, so and with him moving inside, they've moved Caden Wallace to the right tackle spot. So it's just like, are we having Chuks Okorafor as our left tackle when he didn't play particularly well on the right side for Pittsburgh last year? And I mean, I know that maybe that's the way they view, you know, we can scheme around one weak position, but left tackle seems like a rough position to be, to be trying to scheme around. So that's my first concern. Thoughts?
And I hear that concern.
Well,
I hear that concern. I think what's very interesting about that concern is I certainly think that the Patriots feel a lot differently about Caden Wallace than you and I do. I'm indifferent on Caden Wallace. I think the fact that he didn't play left tackle is solely because Fashanu was there at Penn State. But I just wonder if for some reason they know something we don't. Now, with Okorafor is playing left tackle, that's mildly concerning to me. Because he didn't play all that well on the right side in Pittsburgh, as you had mentioned. Part of me also sort of wonders if this is going to be a little bit of another year where they're just like, well, we're not going to be all that good on offense. Obviously, our first-round pick is going to be a tackle. They've got quarterback already solved with Drake May. And I just sort of wonder if they're just sort of just trotting whatever combinations they have out until they can get that next tackle in the draft.
Yeah,
that's sort of my thought.
That's certainly possible. I mean, my concern with that is, you know, I don't subscribe to the idea of hiding Drake May all year. I think you drafted a guy number 3 to play quarterback, and you know, I basically look, as long as it's not like, who was it? There was somebody last year who got hit on literally a quarter of his dropbacks last year. I think it was Will Levis.
I was just about to say, is that Will Levis?
Will Levis got hit on like a quarter of his dropbacks last year. If it's going to be a situation like that, I don't want Drake May anywhere near that. If they can put together serviceable protection in front of him, I want him playing. I know that they brought in and paid $7 million, or I think it was $7 million, to Jacoby Brissett in the event that they needed that bridge. But if Drake May is showing that he has the ability and he is the best quarterback and he is the quarterback, you know, and you feel that getting him out there is going to be best for his development, that's what you should do. Unless you're going to get him killed. Unless you're going to turn him into Andrew Luck. And that's my fear with...
Or David Carr.
Chuks Okorafor. David Carr, great example.
Yeah.
And on top of everything else, like, you don't really know about City So or Antonio Maffi or these guys who, you know, I mean, City So was serviceable and maybe having a full off season at, you know, the position that he should have been playing the whole time will help. But it's a concern for me, you know, so I don't want to hide the quarterback that we drafted, you know, 3rd overall. But I have legitimate concerns about what they've put in front of him. And it's the same concerns that I had with Mac Jones. It's, you know, honestly, you know,
Sure.
I mean, Mac Jones had a host of other problems too, and his lack of athleticism when faced with an inferior line was one of those, and that's not as much of a problem with May. But
No.
I mean, we've seen other athletic quarterbacks, big athletic quarterbacks, just get the crap beat out of them, and
that's where I think Luck is probably the best comp there. I think a name.
Look, you look at a guy like Anthony Richardson last year.
Yeah.
You don't have to go that far back.
No, you don't. I think a name that we haven't thought of, is in terms of the offensive line mix. And granted, his last season was as turbulent as one could be.
You're gonna say it, aren't you?
I'm gonna say Calvin Anderson. Yeah.
Man, I'm hoping. I'm rooting for that guy hard. He basically, I mean, he's the lottery ticket, as far as I'm concerned. Because
magic beans.
Of all the guys who have the most uncertainty, because let's face it, the guy almost died of malaria. So it's a different animal than what anybody else who's underperformed or got injured or something like that has dealt with. Like, this guy had a 50-50 shot of living, basically like right around this time last year.
Right.
So,
but at this point,
I guess I'm not. That would be great, but I'm not.
It would be great.
Banking.
I'm not holding my breath either. I'm not holding my breath either. I'm looking at their roster, and he's the first guy. So I was like, wait, we didn't even talk about Calvin Anderson. Well, we like Calvin Anderson too.
I think that him being, I see him best in that kind of swing tackle kind of role, which I think is what they kind of envisioned for him when they brought him in, last year.
I agree.
So, I mean, granted, if they ended up needing to stick him on the left side, maybe it works. I mean, or maybe they see something in a core four that, that nobody else does, and they're going to unlock some, something from him.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is...
There's so many unknowns, though, that, like, there's so many things about this team that we don't know. Like, we don't know what sort of, like, blocking scheme they're going to have. We don't even know the offense. So it's very interesting. I don't know if you've watched any of the Hard Knocks episodes thus far, but I saw the clip, and I don't know if you've seen it either, of the Giants interviewing Drake May at the Combine.
I didn't see that one.
They were so enamored with him that Joe Shane basically was like, I'm going to go over to New England and just put the bug in their ear and put the bug in their ear of, if you're thinking about doing something at 3, call us first, kind of thing. And that makes me feel good that there were other teams that looked at May that way. But at the same point, like, I almost envy the Giants' offensive line situation compared to the Patriots' offensive line situation at this point. And it's, I don't want to, like, keep poo-pooing on the offensive line and on this offense, but because I think there are some legitimate things to be really excited about. I saw clips of Pop Douglas working out the other day and he looks ripped and speedy and good. I saw clips of Christian Gonzalez on the other side of the ball, looking in great shape, looking really fast, looking really great. There are really great young players on this team. I just don't know how it's going to go after just how poorly last year went.
A lot of teams have good young players, like on bad teams, and what ends up happening? Those players end up going elsewhere.
Yep, they walk out the door.
But I agree that there are some good young building block pieces here, and it's also been nice to see them invest in some of those. Barmore contract, is a prime example of that. I know that people kind of snicker at the number of guys that they. I'm going to say even in terms of young guys, Jelani Tavai is only like 27. He struck me as older. So
and I love that contract, by the way.
Yeah,
keep the guys you like. And there's plenty to like about Jelani Tavai.
And there's some snickering and stuff like that among the fan base of, oh yeah, you're bringing everybody back from a 4-win team. But especially on the defensive side, I think that we saw that, while not a great unit, that unit was pulling its weight. That was not the problem. I mean, when it comes to today's NFL, you've got maybe one or two like elite defenses, and then you've got a bunch, that are all pretty good. And in today's NFL, that's what it is. I think that the Patriots have a pretty good defense, and if their offense shows anything, they're going to be in much better shape than they were last year, obviously. I mean,
if they show anything on offense, it's gravy.
So, getting back to the offense, the second concern that I had, because I have very few concerns on defense outside of they don't have like that situational free safety. Bring back Duron Harmon.
As we talked about with the Red Sox about having an adult in the room, Duron Harmon would be the either Duron Harmon or, and I'll drop a name on you of somebody who, as far as I know, hasn't signed anywhere, Stephon Gilmore.
Yeah, that's another one. And the longer he's out there, I mean, he's said that he's not opposed to coming back. So,
and he'd be the exact guy I'd want Christian Gonzalez to learn under.
That would be awesome. But the other offensive question that I have, I guess it's not so much a concern, but a question. And I know a lot of the veteran guys, I don't even have it up, but who's still out there. The veteran guys may not sign until later at this point.
Yes,
running back. Behind Stevenson, you've got a career third down back,
Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, and who else? I mean, is Kevin Harris a lock for this team? I mean, JaMychal Hasty, you already have a third down back. So I think that they're running back short. It doesn't have to be, I mean, I think that, especially in an offense, look, I'm making an assumption on the offense based on what similar systems have looked like. A lot of it is running the football to set up big plays in play action. So that means a lot of wear on your running back. I think Ramondre Stevenson is a 3-down back.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
In the sense that he can play on any of those 3 downs. I'm not saying play him on all 3 of those downs. I think that there's a need to protect the asset a little bit.
I agree with that. Do you want to know who's available?
It's not a big problem. It's just one of those things where every time I look at it, I'm just like, I feel like they're one short.
It bugs you a little bit, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, not that Zeke was anything great, but he kind of fit that role pretty well as a guy who could take some of the load off. It didn't, nothing with this offense looked great, so I'm not going to make it any more than that. But yeah, that was it was that kind of guy who really kind of just offered support when it was needed. So you had a list.
Okay. Do you want to know who is available?
Let's hear who's available.
Cam Akers. Okay, great. No, that's all the thought I need, Matt Breida.
You know, I've always liked the idea of Matt Breida more than I've actually liked Matt Breida.
Right? He's Matt Breida. Life with Matt Breida reminds me a lot of that scene in 500 Days of Summer where it's a dual screen of reality versus expectations. Next up is Kareem Hunt, who, by the way, is only 28.
And it's
a lot younger than I thought.
Yeah, that is younger than I thought. The thing is, it seems like he does not have the burst anymore. I also have a problem with having people on my team who have kicked women.
Same. I'm just going through the list.
And for me, I think that it's a bigger deal that Robert Kraft doesn't like those kinds of people on his team.
I agree.
So I think that kind of takes him off the list.
I think it does too. I'm just going down through the list. Next is Latavius Murray, who's a guy I've always liked.
The ageless Latavius Murray.
34, baby. He's 34. Been around the block. Again, could use an adult in the room.
That's the name that excites me the most, honestly, out of the ones that you've given me so far.
Next is Jerick McKinnon,
who's also more of a third down back.
Right. Marlon Mack.
Who, I mean, I don't know. You have Kevin Harris.
Right. Josh Kelly.
Josh Kelly might have been the worst running back in the league last year.
I know. Not to be confused with the Josh Kelly who married Katherine Heigl from Grey's Anatomy and had that one hit song that was on 94.7 a lot about 15 years ago.
Wow, that's a pull.
It is a pull. The next three names, I don't want you to laugh at them. Lynn Bowden, Eno Benjamin, Deion Jackson. And that's it for unrestricted free agent running backs.
Yeah, so I think
Latavius Murray?
I mean, that seems like the viable option. I'd also be wondering how things shake out when rosters start getting cut down and things like that.
I'm good, sorry.
All right.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, so I think that I'd be interested in seeing how things shake out when rosters start getting cut down. I don't think we're right at the point now where we're looking at cap casualties, so to speak. But if you do have a veteran who loses a job to a younger guy or something like that, who might shake free or something like that, maybe you swing a trade with a low draft pick or something like that. But again, we also don't. We know a little bit about how Elliot Wolf, wants to handle stuff like that, but he's now the guy calling the shots, so we don't know exactly how he's approaching, this kind of roster construction and such. So more uncertainty, but like I said, this is of the four. This is the thing that's most uncertain. So, but yeah, so those were the two things that are really concerning. Not even concerning. The offensive line is concerning to me. Running back just feels like they could use another piece there. Maybe they really like Kevin Harris.
Maybe.
I don't know, or maybe they see a bigger role for Gibson than he's had previously.
Maybe.
But because he's a different kind of he's been a third down back, really, but he's a different kind of third down back. He's like 220 pounds.
He's big.
220 pounds. So I don't think he's a guy who you can hand it off to 200 times or anything like that. But it's possible they see him as a guy who can be more than just that situational, rotational piece. So who knows?
And he's different than most of the third down backs that they've ever had too. And like he's not like the little water bug Danny Woodhead, Kevin Falk types.
But
which is going to be interesting.
He's big, but he's still fast. Like this is not,
Yeah. He's not Steven Jackson, who was big.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So, any other thoughts on the Patriots roster at this point? Oh, I have one more, but I'll let you.
No. I want to hear your next one.
I don't know if they've got a kicker on the roster.
Ooh, I am here for questions about Chad Ryland. I am here for this.
I mean, and that's basically it. I mean, we've come to the Joey Sly part of the conversation. So,
they have Joey Sly now too.
Yeah, and from what I've understood from what they've seen in practice and such so far, neither of them have been outstanding. So,
no.
I mean, when you're, look, this is a team that could be much better than they are last year, or than they were last year, and still win 4 or 5 games based on what the schedule is projected to be.
Yeah.
So, kicker may not be much of a concern or a priority at this point. It's just another one of those things that I'm looking at. I'm just like, man, do they have their week 1 kicker on this roster?
I wonder if that's a wait until cuts come down.
Yeah.
Because is that not how they got Folk too? Didn't he get cut and then, or was he like during camp? Because they had drafted the weird kid. Remember they drafted the weird kid from Marshall?
Yeah. I don't remember the exact situation with that. Kickers for me kind of got messy for a while when they brought in like Mike Nugent and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So, it was bad for a while, and Folk really kind of solidified things there for a while. So,
who was who was it? Shane Graham. Didn't they have Shane Graham for like
he had
6
a
or 7 weeks?
Here. And then he got hurt. I think he hurt his knee. Yeah. Anyway, so that was my last thing. Defense. I don't. You covered some of the concerns that I have with defense, which are primarily like whatever's happening with. I mean, maybe they have a plan in place for pass rush, and there's a succession plan, so they're not much worried about working on an extension there. But I don't know.
Here's my question, though. Actually,
the defense isn't going to be my primary concern with this team. It's not even going to be my secondary concern with this team, unless they get hit with a rash of injuries.
I'll give you a good defensive question. Is our guy Steel Chambers going to get a fair shot at linebacker? I hope so.
I hope so.
I hope so.
I kind of wonder how the new kickoff rules are going to sway teams in terms of whether they're keeping extra linebackers and things like that. Because it's basically going to be like a running play now.
I know.
It's much more of a running play. I'm kind of excited to see how this all pans out. I know that they've done similar things in lesser leagues, but I think that's one of the more fascinating league-wide storylines. This is either going to be one of those things where like everybody gets stopped, or it's going to be the opposite, and guys are just going to be breaking free for touchdowns, left and right for a period of time. And it's going to be interesting because every team's going to be trying out different things with this and going to have a different strategy. So I'm kind of the mind that it's more likely that they're going to, at least initially, going to be a lot more like breakthrough, touchdowns off of kickoffs, simply because one team's, what one team has out there just is completely ineffective to what the returning team is throwing at them.
Sure.
So anyway, but I think that is going to have a real impact on roster construction and who gets kept on the team. I think that it's a bad sign for a guy like Jalen Reagor, who basically runs fast in a straight line, doesn't have the wiggle, I wonder if this makes more opportunities for kickoff returns for a guy like Demario Douglas. Because it's more like a punt than it is a than it is a kickoff, like in the traditional sense. So anyway, we could I don't want to get into
we could talk about this for so long.
But any other thoughts or concerns or things that you're encouraged about with this Patriots roster as it's constructed right now?
No, other than I am all in on my investment in both Javon Baker and Kalen Polk and Jaheim Bell. I'm all in on all three. I don't even know what Jaheim Bell's position is going to be. I just feel like, I don't know, they just like that guy.
So here's a fun one. Let's see Jaheim Bell return some kicks in this new format.
When you were saying that, I was sort of thinking, I was like, maybe that's a thing that Jaheim Bell can do. I didn't tell you this. I was thinking about this on a commute home at some point, and maybe it was during minicamp, and they were talking about like moving Jaheim Bell all around, and a name popped into my head that was an old Patriots name that I think is going to give you a little bit of the warm and fuzzies, and it's Larry Centers. That maybe they turn him into a modern day Larry Centers, just catching it out of the backfield at like fullback.
Love that.
Could be fun. Loved Larry Centers.
All right, so we're running a little long, so I'm just gonna cover this last thing quickly. We are also coming up on the Olympics, and I know you're very, very excited.
I love the Olympics. I do.
Me too. Especially the Summer Olympics. I'm a big fan. But I'm wondering, what is the one thing that you are like? What are you watching? Like, what's the one thing that you are not going to miss in this Olympics?
Noah Lyles in the 100-meter dash and 200-meter. Fastest man in the world right now. And he's American, and he's electrifying. I feel the same way about the women's 100 and 200 with Sha'Carri Richardson. It's going to be I feel like it's going to be one of those Olympics that the American track and field team is they're just going to blow people away. One of the things that I love about this USA track team, they also have a 16-year-old, Quincy Wilson is his name, who's going to run the 4x4 if Noah Lyles doesn't get his chance to run the 4x4, which would be really fun to see him try and kind of capitalize on all of the kind of the more sprinty events. But what I love about where USA Track is right now is they have so many really great runners, so many talented runners, that I think it's going to be just really fun to watch Lyles, the 4x4 team, and Sha'Carri Richardson.
So for me, it's actually there are two things, and it's actually two athletes in particular. It's the women's gymnastics and women's swimming, and it's Simone Biles and Katie Ledecky. And obviously they've been the most dominant in their sports respectively for a long time at this point. What's interesting to me is now they're entering a different phase of their career. And it was something not dissimilar to Michael Phelps in that he was still the consensus. These are still the consensus, best in the world as far as most people are concerned. At least their perceptions of it. But at some point, at what point does the field start to creep up? And is this the year that happens? I mean, from what we've seen at various trials and things leading up to the Olympics, it doesn't seem that way. At least,
No.
From what we've seen, But that's always when an athlete kind of reaches, they've reached this pinnacle, and now they're entering this next phase of their career, and how that goes is fascinating to me.
I agree with that. I think Ledecky is very interesting to watch. Annie and I watched a lot of the my wife. We watched a lot of the Olympic trials for swimming because it was on, and NBC did the greatest thing of putting it on prime time during the summer.
Yeah.
And they, I don't know if you saw any of it. They had it at Lucas Oil Stadium, which was really cool.
Yeah.
How they built that pool. It's what they're going to do at SoFi for the Los Angeles games in 4 years. But what I loved was watching Ledecky swim. Because watching Katie Ledecky swim is like watching the best of whatever art form do what they do. And I forget what event it is. It might be the 1500, where Katie Ledecky just has like a 20-second gap between the next person. And it's so fun to watch. Like, it's sort of one of those things where you almost just have to laugh and like laugh, being just like, oh, she's so much better than everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much fun to watch Katie Ledecky swim because it's like, oh no, she's the best in the world at this. Okay.
And for me, having been a swimmer and having coached swimming, I mean, she's just so technically sound. She's never fighting the water. Like you said, it's beautiful. It's an art form. It's one of those things where if I were still swimming, or if I was still coaching, this would be something that this would be appointment viewing for my swimmers, because there's no struggle ever. It's all so smooth. It's so technically sound. It's the Tom Brady of it's the Tom Brady of swimming, because it's not necessarily it's technique is such a big part of it. We've seen other greats. So I'm pulling the football references. Patrick Mahomes is not the most the most technically sound athlete. He has other things going for him. But like Tom Brady was always the technique, and working that and perfecting it. And that's something that Katie Ledecky has done. There is no flaw that I can see.
And I think that's the same way, kind of cutting off at the pass a little bit about Simone Biles. Yeah. You could fill libraries with the amount of things that I don't know about women's gymnastics, but I know that when I watch Simone Biles, that I know that, okay, she knows this and does this better than anybody else. And I think she didn't get a fair shot in Japan, especially after getting the twisties and people not really understanding what that meant. I think casuals like you and I probably heard that being just like, okay, this doesn't make sense.
Right.
But what I think is so interesting about her doing this now, this seems like this is just, the cherry on top. Like, this is a bonus. This is, all right, cool. One last ride. Let's go. And being an Olympics nerd like I am, that, like the Dream Team in '96 didn't get an opportunity to get another shot at it. Or, or the '04 gymnasts didn't necessarily get that same shot in Beijing in '08. So I think what's going to be really fun seeing Simone Biles compete in Paris is it's going to be very much just like, all right, cool, we're here, we're doing this. This is just what we're doing, and I think it's going to be really fun to watch Simone do that, and I think it's going to be really fun to watch Suni Lee, who won the gold in Japan, try and keep pace too. Suni Lee is also really good. She's a really good gymnast. It's an embarrassment of riches that the U.S. always has. So it's going to be really fun to see what Team USA can do in all the events, including women's swimming, track and field, and gymnastics too.
All right. Well, hey, we never we're never short on opinions here. We always tend to go along with these. So not that that's a bad thing at all, but
no.
As always, it's been a pleasure. Do you have any parting thoughts or parting words?
I do not. I think this has been a great conversation that you and I usually always have. It's great to sort of have these conversations that you and I kind of text back and forth to each other, kind of in live and in living color, which has been really great. I think at some point, hopefully we don't take too much time before this. I think hopefully maybe around training camp time, maybe we can talk about what our, rosters of 53 maybe look like at the end of training camp. Not to give you ideas or anything, but I think definitely we should sort of at least, kind of keep sort of a regular dialogue on these on this stuff here for the Maza's Musings audience here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get working on that. So training camp starts in a couple of weeks, if I'm
yes, it does.
Correct. At the end of July, right? So well, we can discuss this later. I've got a Disney trip coming up the beginning of August, so I may have to wait until after that. But
yeah, go do your thing. Go have fun.
So, sort of like I said, hey, we should get on and talk. And you're like, well, yeah, maybe when I get back from Europe.
Right, exactly. When the Celtics were in the NBA Finals, I had the thought in my head. I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to really do some sleep math if the Celtics do not end this on Monday. And thank the Lord they ended it the night before I left, because had they not, I would have had to do some very weird sleep math / tried to figure out, how I could get information at certain points.
I'm sure Annie would have loved that.
Oh, she would have been so thrilled. So thrilled.
All right, sir. Well, as always, a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining.
Of course. Thank you, Chris.
Well, I'm going to say for a fact that it will not take this long for me to have Greg Cameron back. We hadn't spoken since before the NFL draft, at least not in a recorded sense. We've been bantering back and forth for months, but it's been great to actually get to sit down and talk about some of this stuff. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed doing it. If you are enjoying the podcast, please leave a rating, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. You can share our social media, which is the Maza's Musings Podcast on Facebook. You can also find Maza's Musings Pod on Instagram. You can reach out to me directly at mazasmusings@gmail.com. Or you can direct people straight to our website, mazasmusings.wordpress.com, where again they can find past episodes, some of that contact information, the link tree to a whole bunch of different social media and other items that could be of use to them. And the best way, honestly, is good old-fashioned word of mouth. Let people know. If you're enjoying the podcast, say, hey, this is a good podcast that I'm listening to. Why don't you give it a try? We've got some really interesting topics coming up over the next few weeks. I'm not going to promise anything because I've already had to make a pivot once. And I also want to thank you with this particular episode for bearing with some of the technical issues, but we worked through it and we got one out. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for listening. And with all that said, I hope you have a great weekend and a great week.